They've got our people so mentally enslaved that telling the truth now literally offends millions. Nonetheless, those of us who know the truth must teach African proverb. I refuse to assign a religious fairy tale and a silly slave syndrome myth upon the painful reality of our long-term oppression. When we base our liberation upon easily proven works of fiction, we are in fact making fools of ourselves. A speaker of truth has no friends, African proverb. Rather than joining the crowd of the mentally enslaved ones, I'd rather instead stand alone on a path of what's actually true, thus gaining an accurate understanding of our plight and condition. By seeking a path of what's actually true, at least in doing so, I would have spent my life in a worthy cause. And if I fail, at least I fail while having done daringly, so that my place shall not be remembered among those of our people that are so mentally enslaved that they refuse to critically think for themselves. Therefore, they go from their cradles to their graves, being mentally enslaved by the lies of our oppressors. They go from their cradles to their graves, never knowing the truth. Therefore, having lived their entire lives while their minds were never truly their own. And the mental enslavement is so strong that telling the truth literally offends millions. Nonetheless, I would rather lose mentally enslaved friends for telling the truth than to endorse false beliefs that literally insults my own intelligence in order to hold on to mentally enslaved friends. Our core problem is that the mentally enslaved ones have been made overconfident. Therefore, they fight fiercely against those of us who try to free their minds. While to the contrary, the intelligent and awakened ones, many have been made self-doubting, and they therefore remain silent. This silence allows the false belief held by the mentally enslaved ones to prevail throughout our communities, thus keeping the Black masses mentally enslaved. Mental slavery is the worst form of slavery because it makes its victim defend the mental enslaving lies that have been indoctrinated into their minds by their oppressors, while at the same time they make enemies of their own people that attempt to free their minds from those lies. The mentally enslaved ones are literally programmed to function as wardens of their own mental prison. Whenever we allow such ignorance to go unchecked, we're literally supporting the mental enslavement of our people. Therefore, those of us who know the truth must teach African proverb. The truths are that we did not make the N-word ours, and using it does not empower us. We are not our worst enemies. Our worst enemies are still oppressive forces. We are not being controlled by a silly Willie Lynch myth. That silly myth presents what would in fact be the least plausible and the least effective method used for controlling generations of millions of people. It's simply not how true brainwashing is achieved. It's absolutely not. And the belief that a book that was brutally beaten into the minds of our ancestors by their ungodly enslavers will now set us free makes no sense at all. Furthermore, a book that strongly condones slavery, that was written by ungodly Romans in the year 325 AD, that routinely engaged in lots of immoral acts, is totally disqualified from containing the true words of an infallible God. And we African Americans are in fact Africans. Millions of DNA analyses have scientifically confirmed our African identity. We must stop believing in things that literally insults our own intelligence and start functioning based on what is truth. Our people are drowning in disinformation, and it's all by deliberate design. Oppressive forces have spread lots of disinformation into our communities because they know that in order for us to develop the proper counter strategies that are necessary in order to liberate ourselves, we must first gain an accurate and clear understanding of our plight and condition. Because if our understandings remain flawed, then all of our liberating strategies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. This is why they spread so much disinformation into our community. They keep us drowning in disinformation that keeps our understandings flawed, thus keeping our liberating strategies flawed. The truth of our plight and condition is that unlike at the conclusion of World War II, when the Jewish Holocaust ended and the US and the UN contributed massive financial support to rebuild their lives, there was no moral obligation to do the same for we Africans. For although the African Holocaust lasted hundreds of years longer, resulted in millions of more deaths, and more greatly decimated the African culture, when slavery was abolished, America, Great Britain, and the many other white nations that benefited from their brutal exploitation of we Africans felt no moral obligation to restore our culture. They instead focused on their own self-interest by socializing we Africans. Socialize is when the oppressors exploits their monopoly over information that are fed into the minds of the oppressed to manipulate the oppressed to think in ways that are against our own interests and that instead serve the interests of our oppressors. This isn't some feeble-minded conspiracy theory, as so many of you have been socialized to think and respond. It's a common practice throughout history. Throughout history, those empires that were brutally oppressive, fearing eventual retribution from those they brutalized, have often socialized them. It is how brutalizers protect themselves from retribution from those they brutalized. This nefarious practice was never abandoned. It's the warfare tactic that white oppressive forces have deployed against the black population. There are 4 ways to effectively socialize an entire generation of people: by what we're taught, by what we see, by what we hear, and through repetition. Because the oppressors control the education we're taught, the media images we see, the societal narratives that we repetitively hear, and through repetition, they've exploited these combined factors to covertly socialize the collective minds of the black masses to think in ways that benefits our oppressors. They do it without most of us even realizing it. Because they control most of the contents that are systematically being fed into our collective minds, they've exploited this scenario to socialize the collective minds of the black masses to think in ways that are beneficial to them. It's the true hidden reason why many of us now perceives ourselves as being our worst enemies and reveres and defends our oppressors in spite of such a brutally horrific history to the contrary. It's always by deliberate design when the oppressed are thinking in ways benefiting their oppressors. It's always because they've been socialized. By socializing our minds, they've shifted our collective aggressions away from the oppressive society and redirected against ourselves. It's how they prevent us from unifying against them, thus protecting their society from massive unified black retribution. Moreover, the socializing process is reinforced unrelentingly through ongoing media propaganda campaigns. The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of the black population that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually an insidious, black, racially demoralizing, divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralized divide and rule is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between them. This demoralized divide and rule warfare system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects the Black population to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this system, fraudulent Black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the Black masses without being counterbalanced nor challenged by an equal amount of positive Black racially affirming information. This one-sided flow of only negative information about us being directed towards the Black population, they are deliberately designed to demoralize us, divide us, create Black self-loathing, and it shifts our collective aggressions away from our enemies and redirects it towards ourselves. It also attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and we can then be ruled over forever. It's a well-documented and well-proven social science tactic used for controlling large targeted populations through unrelenting demoralization. It utilizes the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave millions of Black people. And it's so elaborate that it goes beyond the comprehension of most. White social scientists describe what they've done to us as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of Black people that makes us adhere to the authority and existing infrastructure of the white dominant society. Then more simply put, it makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. It's how the oppressor secretly protects itself from massive unified Black retribution. The African slaves of the 21st century are those who cannot overcome the oppressor's socializing of our mind. This is the truth of our plighted condition. It's time to function based on what is true.